circumstances. But we're going to crank off this afternoon. We've got more than a full house. Some of the folks that are in the back that were not able to get seated, we had no idea what the crowd size was. We thought that this facility would probably accommodate it. I think the crowd size reminds us of the gravity of the situation that y'all are dealing with. We're going to have another session at 4 o'clock for anybody that could not get in, could not get seated. So for those of y'all in the back, y'all can either stand and whatever works for you, or anybody that 4 o'clock works better for, whether you're in here already or back there, we will do another one at 4 o'clock. With that, we've got a full agenda this afternoon, and we hope we'll be able to share some information with you that works. For those of you that I didn't have the honor of meeting, I'm Chuck Williams, the Director and State Forester of the Georgia Forestry Commission, and you can see a lot of our team members here. Most of them are in GFC uniforms. But the first thing I want to do is introduce someone really that needs no introduction, so I'll keep it very short to those of you here from this part of the state. Congressman Sanford Bishop, we all know him. We all know the job that he has done over, what, 13 terms now, Congressman for Agriculture and Forestry and Natural Resources for not only y'all here in the 2nd District, but the state of Georgia. He is legendary for his ability to work across the aisle in D.C., and if we have ever needed that, folks, we're going to need it now in the coming days and weeks and months. So it's my pleasure to ask you to join me in welcoming Congressman Bishop, and I'm going to ask him to open us up with a word of prayer. Let's welcome Congressman Bishop.
Thank you very much, Chuck, and I'm glad to be, but not to be here under these circumstances. But this is the day that the Lord has made, so we have to rejoice and be glad in it in spite of the circumstances. So if you would, bow with me in prayer. Father God, we thank you for life, for strength, for health, and for jobs to do. We thank you for the opportunity to serve, because we know that by serving your people, we serve you. We have been hit, as you know, by great devastation in the form of Hurricane Michael. We know that you have all power in your hand and that you have all healing in your hand. And as we come together today to deliberate on how we can recover from this disaster, we pray that you will open up our understanding, that you will move us out of the way and fill us with your wisdom, that we may share ideas, that we may take those ideas and put them to work, that we may be able to implement policies and practices that will result in a full recovery, recovering our people, our communities, getting us back to where you would have us to be. Pray that you will be with all those families that were touched, those families who lost loved ones, and all of the people who were impacted by the storm in any way. I pray that you will send your Holy Spirit to console us, to comfort us, but also to empower us and strengthen us to do the work necessary to recover and replace the damage to our communities. These blessings we ask in the name of your Son, Jesus, because you told us that whatsoever we ask in your name, that shall we receive. Therefore we ask and we claim the victory in your name. Amen. Amen. Well, good afternoon. And let me just say that I come as your congressman. I thank you for allowing me to serve you over the last 26 years. During those 26 years, we've suffered any number of disasters. We've had 2 500-year floods, we've had hurricanes, we've had tornadoes, and those disasters have hit our people yet we have been able to recover and keep going. This disaster is perhaps one of the most devastating in terms of a hurricane coming inland that we've ever experienced. And the damage is still being calculated, as you very well know. I've had the opportunity to visit each and every one of the counties that was most heavily and directly hit, several on more than one occasion. Decatur County here on more than one occasion. I have been joined in my visits by the President, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Secretary of Agriculture, the Governor, the Commissioner of Agriculture, the Vice President, and the Second Lady, our two senators, Congressman Austin Scott, whose district is adjacent to the second district, who was also hit. I've had an opportunity to talk with my colleague. I serve, for those of you who may not know, as the ranking member of the Agriculture Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives. My chairman is Robert Aderholt of Alabama. Alabama was also hit, and together the two of us have communicated with all of the states that were hit, the commissioners of agriculture, and all of the stakeholders, and we've let them know that we will do everything in our power to make sure that the resources necessary for full recovery are put in place. Today, we are sending a letter to the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Rodney Frelinghuysen, requesting an emergency agriculture supplemental appropriations bill to deal with the disaster. Congress is not in session. We won't go back until November 13th, but we have put that request in so that as soon as we get back, we can hit the ground running. We've suffered tremendous damage. The cotton crop has been devastated. The pecan crop, devastated. The trees that are generational have been devastated. Vegetables, devastated. And of course, timber, devastated. I'm sorry. We have really been hit in a way that we've not experienced before. And I want you to know that I'm all ears for suggestions that you may have, and that we will put into place, to the fullest extent possible, our recovery efforts. Now, specifically with regard to timber, Georgia, prior to this storm, had the largest stand of privately owned timber of any state in the country. Florida had a lot, Alabama had some, but we had the most. We had the most pecans of any state in the Union. Our pecan orchards are just really devastated. We have the TAP program that we will fully implement for TAP, but unfortunately, because of the law that was put in place years ago, timber is not included in that TAP program. It's only trees that produce fruit or nuts. As a consequence, we will be working to try to tweak our disaster programs, the WHIP program from last year, from the last hurricane, as well as working with the, I think it's called the Emergency Forest Restoration Program, which will not come close to making you whole. That will provide some relief for clearing the debris, clearing the downed trees, and reforestation planting another stand. But timber, just like pecans, are generational. It's generational loss. So it will take 7 to 10 years for the pecan orchards to come back and be productive, and it will take as long or longer for the new seedlings that we plant in timber. But please know that we're going to do our dead level best to find a way to make you as close to whole as we can. That's a big ask. None of the disaster programs are designed to pay 100% loss. But we're going to do our best to make you as whole as we can. We are going to the Appropriations Committee. The President, the Vice President, the Secretary of Agriculture have all committed to do their best to restore and to make it as good or better than before. That's a big ask, it's a big job, but we're going to do our best. And with that, I will yield the floor back, because I know that you have lots of questions that you'd like to ask, and there's a presentation that will be given. But I want you to know I'm yours, and your losses are my losses. I've bragged about our district being a strong agricultural district, producing the highest quality, the safest, the most abundant, and the most economical food and fiber anywhere in the world. We do that. We've done that, and we will continue to do that. But being #1 in blueberries, #1 in pecans, #1 in peanuts, at the top in cotton, at the top in poultry, and we lost a lot of chicken houses, and #1 in forestry, it's not anything that we can take lightly. It's going to have a tremendous impact on the state. The governor recognizes that, and that he has called a special session of the Georgia General Assembly, which will convene November 13th, which is the same day that we will reconvene in Congress. With that, I will yield back to Chuck and be available for any questions that you might have of me.
Congressman, thank you very much. And I don't know what your schedule allows. Again, we're going to be here sort of for as long as it takes, but again, we're going to have another session at 4 o'clock. So if we have to cut this one off, any of you that are here that want to stay for round 2 are welcome to do so. Congressman Bishop mentioned the folks in elected positions that are not only aware but are focused on this, and certainly Governor Deal, the ultimate boss that I work for, is very focused. I've had the opportunity to visit face-to-face with him several times since the hurricane hit, and he and his staff are very aware of what's going on. Ag Commissioner Gary Black, we all know that probably a lot of you in this room have both production ag interest and forestry interest, and Gary Black is a dear friend of mine, and we have been sort of joined at the hip since really a day or two before the hurricane hit. We're communicating back and forth about the issues that his core constituents, the ag producers, are facing, what our core constituents, timber folks, are facing. But again, in a lot of cases, as y'all know, those circles overlap. I know State Senator Dean Burt was here earlier, was sort of in the big crowd in the back, and stepped out, said he might be able to join us back at 4 o'clock. Congressman Bishop mentioned Austin Scott, who actually may represent some of you in the room, but probably most of you are constituents of Congressman Bishop. I've had a chance to visit with Congressman Scott, spoke with him as recently as yesterday, and he stands ready to work with Congressman Bishop and the Congress and the White House in doing everything that can be done. So I can just tell you in good conscience, with a straight face, that you're not alone. The state of Georgia is standing with you from one end of the state to the other, and I think we can all take a little bit of comfort in that. But the fact is, you're the folks that are here on the front line dealing with the hand that the good Lord and Mother Nature sent your way. Our objective today is to try to share with you some information, particularly about about what your options are as landowners as far as salvage options for damaged timber. You know, when the storm blew through, really the winds had not subsided up in the northern end of the state where it left before the Georgia Forestry Commission folks were here in your communities. We stood up right around 150 of our GFC professionals outside of our employees, some of whom are here, that generally work in this area. We had 10 chainsaw strike teams that were rolling the night that the storm moved through, and we had an incident command team in Tifton. And we sort of were on the tip of the spear along with partners from DNR and GDOT, obviously GEMA, our federal partners, USDA and others, on trying to basically help your communities just sort of get back open, if you will, the next day, get roads cleared and whatnot. But even as we were doing that, as the state's forestry agency that is charged really with helping Georgia's private landowners manage and protect forests, we had one eye on getting roads cleared and really that disaster immediate recovery, and the other on where do we go from here. And that's really what we want to talk about today, is where do we go from here. We have prepared for the benefit of the citizens of Georgia and the elected officials of Georgia a timber damage assessment report, and that is certainly, it's available to you now on our website. I think we've got copies here today. Hopefully some of you have already seen it. But the picture is not pretty. It is not pretty at all, particularly for Decatur and Seminole counties. Obviously the timber destruction we have seen follows the wind speed maps that we have seen and you have seen as far as when Hurricane Michael moved in. So what we will do today, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that damage assessment report. The numbers in it are important. They're important for Congressman Bishop and his cohorts in Washington to understand the gravity of the situation. They're important for the state of Georgia and the Georgia legislature when the governor convenes them on November 13th to understand the gravity of the situation. We believe that you folks know a whole lot better than we do. We prepared a report. You have lived it and are living it. So we're going to talk just briefly about the report and what the numbers tell us, and then we're going to, as quickly as you will allow us to, we're going to segue into talking about what we think the issues are and the options are for timber salvage for this magnificent crop of timber that a lot of you have nurtured, you know, for possibly generations and had plans for it, and now those plans may not stand up. So with that, I am going to take a look at my agenda, and Scott Griffin. Scott is our Chief of Forest Management. He is going to go over the timber impact assessment, and then in the interest of time, rather than me introducing each speaker, I think all of our speakers know the order in which they will be coming up. I will just ask them as one speaker finishes, we will roll into the next speaker, and I'm thinking it may make sense, even though it may slow us down, for you folks to ask questions as each speaker wraps up rather than trying to hold them to the end. I think it'll be more relevant. So we'll try that and see if that works. And with that, we'll turn it over to Scott Griffin. Scott.
All right, thank you, Director Williams. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to report to you the information from our timber damage assessment, and as was said, it's going to be very brief. I'm not going to go into great detail of how we gathered this information, but I do want you to know that, you know, we did go out on the ground and do this assessment, so it was a real detailed effort, and a lot of work went into producing this report. So this is the map that we produced from the report, and we're down here in this area where you see those darker colors. The red represents catastrophic timber damage. That orangish color is severe, and then this largest color you see here is the moderate damage, and then we reported light damage as well. So where that hurricane came into the state is where we were seeing that most catastrophic and severe timber damage, which happened to be, you know, right here in this area. Just some numbers for you. This is a huge impact area from this hurricane. That's one number that I'll point out to you, that nearly 2.4 million acres impacted. about just, you can see the numbers there, but just to give you some percentages, 53% of that was pine, 47% hardwood. We had 16% of that 2.4 million acres in this catastrophic and severe damage, and 61% in the moderate damage level. And this shows you volumes and tons impacted. You know, and these numbers are important for the folks who are, you know, they're going to be, you know, logging these areas, the mills that are going to be receiving this wood. So, you know, it gives them an idea of what kind of volume we're trying to deal with. And this is a lot of timber volume that was put on the ground in just a few hours. So this is the magnitude of the situation. We're talking about over 18 million tons of wood. That's about 720,000 tractor trailer loads. And what happens when that tree disconnects from the root system, whether it was broken or blowed over or whatever, the clock begins to tick and that tree begins to deteriorate, and there's a window that we have to work within. And that'll be talked about later in the program. But we've got the pine value, we have the hardwood value here. That's $374 million, roughly. So a tremendous value of timber that was put on the ground during this very short window. And that just shows you those totals again. We won't go through that, belabor that point. But just to show you the magnitude of the storm, we do have the report in the back. If you hadn't got a copy, pick one of those up. It gives you the details of how that report was developed. So, all right. And one of the challenges to all the speakers today was to give you, we're not up here to make flowery presentations to you. We're here to give you some information. So they're going to be intentionally brief to give you the main information. And with that, are there any questions about the report before our next speaker comes up? All right, thank you.
Can everybody hear me, especially in the back? Yes? Up some? Okay, all right.
Have to stay close to it.
All right. I'm David Dickens with the University of Georgia, and I've been with Georgia for almost 20 years, and with Clemson before that for 11, so don't hold that against me. I happened to go through Hurricane Hugo my first 13 and a half months into my Clemson University faculty position, and I was 22 miles inland from where it had a direct hit on just above Charleston. So I'll go from some experience with that, as well as what we've seen with Matthew and Irma, although Matthew and Irma aren't anything near what Michael was done. Hugo was closer, but it was still 20 miles an hour less than the maximum sustained winds for Michael. We have all sorts of different scenarios, a little bit hard to see with the lighting, but that's a stand that's had a severe amount of damage, and for many that would not be enough trees to work with, okay? And we probably have, down this way, we've got a good bit of that. Do you have the, okay, great. Would any of you think that the number of trees that are still standing and in reasonably good condition, would they be enough trees to work with on your property? And that's, I agree with the people that are doing this. It's simply not. If you've got a pretty productive site, you probably want 80 to 150 good looking trees out there, and it's simply not enough. That's probably somewhere around maybe 40 at best, okay? So this is what we're dealing with a lot, and really over the next 6 months to a year, we want to try to get as much of this wood, both the down wood and the remaining trees, if there are not enough good trees in good condition to work with, to get out of your property, get some money for those, and then look at the next generation of trees. Okay? Categories of damage, Scott went into that briefly with his presentation. Catastrophic and severe, you can almost lump those together. They are very bad situations where a salvage operation, if possible, there's going to be some cases where your property may not be gotten to within this 12-month window, then we have approximately to get as much of this wood to the mills as possible. Okay, there's some storage options at these mills. They call them wet yards, where they can put sprinkler systems. For pulpwood, they can keep that wood for up to 2 years. For saw timber, they can keep the wood on the yard for up to a year without major degradation. You just have to mix the pulp trees that are under the sprinkler system with fresh cut trees, because the pulping process, moisture differences cause problems. So these stands that are catastrophic and severe, we want to really get to those, especially the high value. Place the highest value stands first, okay? That's what